women in our society, while at the same time it also promotes the subordinate role of women. I'm talking about promoting a subordinate role of women and girls to be submissive. Now, when we talk injustice in these terms, we're talking of denial of opportunities and various forms of violence that women and girls suffer from, which originate from a system that establishes, perpetuates as well men's dominance and hegemony. Now, you want to be concerned over the fact that from a very early age, boys are socialized into gender roles that keep men in power and control over women and girls. The girls, on the other hand, are groomed to be wives and not to challenge and question any behaviors and practices that perpetuate injustice at them. Now, many boys and girls, because of this kind of context, do grow up to believe that dominance and dominant behavior over women and girls is part of being a man. So if you put her under the feet, deny her opportunities, you're basically just being a man. Now, that's one of the things we want to be dealing with now, the concept of male power within a household, with the husband considered to be the main decision maker, even over money she makes. You won't believe this. This is what goes on in here. Is valued primarily because that's what it is. Now, women's roles and their value, the value system values women for their role in being productive, having babies, and doing tasks, and that's how intimate power is derived here. And we'll be talking some very scandalous statistics here. One of those being the one I noted here, that according to a demographic house survey here in Uganda, 49% of women and 41% of men believe that a man is justified in beating a woman under certain circumstances. Even women believe so. But that's how we've been raising girls here. And worse still is a view of further concern here that 57% of women and 48% of men who believe so are aged between 18 and 24, and we're saying that can't continue forever. We've got to have a conversation about it, and that is men at work. Let me introduce my panel here, beginning with a woman at work and in the business of changing these things. My sister from another mother, Lady Rosa Malango. She is the resident coordinator of the United Nations in Uganda. Rosa, you're very welcome to this special conversation. And we also do have Paul Lindgard. He is the Swedish ambassador to Uganda. Paul, you're welcome to the conversation. And as well, the gentleman in charge of UN Women in Uganda, country rep here, is Maxime Oinato. Very welcome to the program, Doc. Thank you. We'll begin with you, Rosa, with your statement, then we'll go to Pa, then Maxime, and then we have a conversation. You can release yourself of the burden of breathing less.
Well, thank you very much, Samson. Thank you very much to our development partners, the representatives of the government, our listeners with us here today. It is an honor for me, on behalf of the United Nations system in Uganda, to welcome you to the launch of a new and incredible campaign that will be known as Men at Work for Gender Equality. It is our hope that this joint initiative by the government of Uganda, the new network for positive masculinity, and led by UN Women from the Uganda family, will inspire millions of Ugandans everywhere. This initiative that we launched today aims to build upon the achievements of a former global UN campaign known as, and we expect to work with you during the next 3 years. Our focus will be to inspire new communities of men and boys ready to address the inequalities at the root of violence against women and girls. As we head into a new normal, a new economy, new society norms, we have a critical opportunity to transform by focusing on respect, dignity, and solidarity. Through this campaign, we will be asking men to support us women in the following spheres of life. 1, men at work. My question to you,
What action are you taking to share positions of leadership equitably for women and men in your business or at your office? 2, men in town. What is your behavior in public places? Is it respectful towards women and girls? 3, men at home. How are you contributing to the chores at home and the spirit of shared responsibility for the children, for the family, and for community? And 4th, men in self. What are your thoughts about women? What are the key messages that you would like to share to your sons and nephews and the boys around you about best practices? What are some of the barriers you would like to lift in support of gender equality? Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres once said, "And the male It is true that having power over political, economic, and social affairs is normally associated with masculinity. Despite the fact that a growing number of women are taking on leadership roles in many walks of life, from government to private companies, but the norm and indicators of what constitutes good leadership remain masculine. Just think for a moment, what do you consider good leadership? Women who seek senior positions in business are often stigmatized for not acting like proper women, quote unquote, or for being too manly. While male leaders, for example, are seen as decisive, female leaders are seen as aggressive. Where male leaders are seen as pragmatic, women leaders are seen as pushy. The unconscious assumption that women are fragile, biased, and incapable of effective management is a mindset we need to change now. Women in leadership and professional roles are often seen as challenging men, and as a result, they face harassment, discrimination, and abuse. In our homes, unpaid domestic work continues to be seen as a feminine responsibility, and men who help are either ridiculed or considered of a lower status. These ideas about femininity and masculinity need to be corrected now, unless we want to continue to see growing violence against women and girls. Gender equality and women empowerment are some of the critical underlying principles that inform our work as the United Nations. The Sustainable Development Goals call on us to leave no one behind. A principle underpinning our first UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework is human well-being and resilience. So we will make sure that this is linked to National Development Plan 3 and part of our cooperation going forward. But as I conclude, I want to highlight 2 messages. The first, achieving gender equality is a journey. So Samson, allow me to share a few milestones for a few other countries so we can see in Uganda, we don't expect to do this overnight.
Please do.
In Sweden, 1842, girls were allowed to school. 1919, women allowed to vote. 1980, the law considering gender discrimination in the workplace comes into force. And we have Sweden here as an inspiration today. The United States, 1910, they constituted the Men's League for Women's Suffrage. 1920, they amended the Constitution to allow everybody to vote regardless of sex. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is a journey. So I will simply conclude with a vote of thanks and a request for everybody to listen to our conversation today. My thanks go to all the workers in the front line responding to COVID-19, everybody working on the humanitarian operations, locals, refugees. You all matter. Thank you for your sacrifice. My thanks also go to the government of Uganda for being willing to be part of this campaign. and to donors like Sweden, without whom this would not be possible. And ultimately, my thanks go to the members of the UN country team who have agreed to join UN Women to transform this campaign into a movement, a positive movement for all in the next 3 years to come. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lady Rosa Malango, the UN country rep here. And when we talk movement, please don't skew movement here. We're talking of a very, very interesting movement here. Let me bring his Swedish ambassador to Uganda. You guys are putting in quite a bit in this campaign. There must be very good reasons, a good reason to be hearing from you.
Thank you very much. And let me start by saying that it's a great pleasure for me indeed to be here today and to speak at the launch of the campaign titled Men at Work for Gender Equality. I am proud of being part of the high-level network for positive masculinity that has initiated this 3-year campaign. I believe we are all here today because we stand with women and girls in their fight for equal rights and opportunities. And we are dedicated to assisting them in any way necessary. The aim of this introductory session is to establish why it's critical to associate men to efforts to achieve gender equality and eliminate patriarchy and toxic masculinity. There is growing acknowledgement and evidence that the approach of empowering women and girls alone will not have the desired and necessary effects of creating greater gender equality. Men and boys must be involved. But equally important, I believe, is to assess the structural and social causes of destructive masculinity norms. Whether it be through political power, family or household relations, occupational positions, religious leadership, or any other contexts, it is a fact that men wield much power over the lives of the women. To exclude or not include men to a sufficient extent would impede efforts to make any real sustainable improvement to the rights and opportunities of girls and women. Negative or toxic forms of masculinities take different forms. Probably the most harmful is that of sexual gender-based violence. It is a symptom of gender inequalities, but also of the structural factors in society. It is indeed a global problem, affecting women and girls in all countries. One of the underlying causes of sexual gender-based violence is the current imbalance of economic, political, and social power through which men dominate. How should we then address negative masculinity? I think we need to explore positive social norms and positive aspects of masculinity that can present opportunities to involve men in ending violence against women and girls. One key to successful social norms change is the inclusion of the notion of active fatherhood in order to show positive role models and to take an active part in children's development. Another positive form of masculinity are men who positively promote women and girls to be active in society through providing access for women and girls to higher education, income-generating activities, and decision-making power. A third theme of positive masculinity is about men actually being non-violent. We men need to reflect on our own behavior, ask questions, but also confront others. If your friends are talking about women in a degrading way, you must question this behavior in order to make a change. We need to change and speak up for gender equality and to move towards a reform definition of what it means to be masculine. We all have a role to play in challenging existing adverse social norms and reshaping stereotypes. The ideal is a world in which every woman and girl can create the kind of life she wishes to lead, unconstrained by harmful norms and stereotypes. And a world, too, in which men are also free from the confines of adverse social norms and stereotypes of manhood and masculinity, and in which economies are growing and creating opportunities for men and women alike. To reach their collaboration and partnerships between businesses, governments, and civil society would be required of an altogether different magnitude and scope than we have managed in the past. The Swedish government is pursuing a feminist foreign policy. Our aim is to ensure that all our work improves women's and girls' power to shape society and their own lives. All our engagements take a gender-sensitive approach, and positive masculinity is also highly encouraged in the strategy for Sweden's development cooperation also here in Uganda. We do focus on specific areas, but gender equality is as well an important dialogue issue that we integrate in all our work and our emphasis on male engagement in becoming increasingly stressed. The United Nations Global He for She campaign was successful and clearly showed that men as positive role models can be very powerful by building new positive view of masculinity. It is important for this success story to continue, and it is under this umbrella that the Network for Positive Masculinity now is launching the 3-year campaign to enhance the progressive role of men and boys in society by addressing existing inequalities in the Ugandan society. In conclusion, I would like to encourage us all to join hands in this cause. Let us collaborate so that we together can maximize women's and girls' potential, rights, and opportunities. Change is possible. Change can happen if we have a vision, courage, and the will to act. The high-level Network for Positive Masculinity is certainly committed to facilitate the change needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul Lindgren, Your Excellency, the Swedish Ambassador to Uganda. Dr. Maxim, it's got to be earth-moving this, because as you know, growing up on this continent, every time you speak of a woman, in the minds of boys and many men, you're speaking of a subordinate person, and some speak of it as if there's nothing wrong with it. That's what it is. Now we are saying, A, it's not what it is, and B, we are going to change it. And we are going to include you in the changing of it. I hear some even watching this saying, no way, get out of this world. That won't happen. Why is it important that we get men into this, to come forward, to address gender discrimination and fight toxic masculinity?
Thank you very much. Thank you also to my boss here present, the resident coordinator, and thank you, Per, for your words. And I must commend you for the question. It's very critical. I will take the opportunity of your question to send a message to men and a message to women and say something quickly about Uganda.
Okay.
My message to men is that we consider gender inequality as a global catastrophe.
Okay.
The humanity has faced a lot of catastrophe in the past. We have seen slavery, we have seen colonization, we have seen apartheid, and in every single one of these catastrophes, the people who are not affected have come up and decided that this is not right. This needs to end. You see, in
The people not affected are the ones to come out.
they came to support the people affected.
Okay.
So slavery would never have ended if you would not have a lot of people from Europe that says that thing that we are doing is not human.
Okay.
The same thing for colonization. Some of the strongest anti-colonial movements were based in Europe.
Okay.
You see apartheid, a lot of white people in South Africa came to join the black people to support the end of apartheid. So we see gender inequality the same way. We don't need to say that only the people who are suffering from gender inequality will be responsible for fighting it. There should be like people that will say, this is not right. This privilege that I'm enjoying, yes, it's sweet, but it's completely wrong. So those are the people that formed in Uganda the high-level network for positive masculinity. Okay. And we have a lot of people in Uganda that says that is the humanity side. Concretely on the economic side, yes, you see the level of GDP of Uganda. Uganda is classified as like not even like an advanced country on the continent. Why? If the work that women were doing in Uganda were counted, were paid, and are counted in the GDP, our GDP will be much higher. Same thing, Uganda spend 77 billion every year fighting gender-based violence. That money could have
78
billion Ugandan shilling every year. It's around the 20-something million US dollars. Every year on gender-based violence. Imagine what we could do with that money. So gender equality is not a matter of women. In terms of humanity, it's important for men to come up. Economically, it's important for men to come up. That's why we are so happy to see so many men that understood that. Minister of Finance, Minister of Gender, a lot of men in government, a lot of men in the private sector. That is one aspect. My message to women is that we have been in this struggle for a long time, and men have been always victim of pointing finger. We have now seen that pointing finger at accusation to men didn't help. Most of the successful approaches have been partnership approaches with men. So that's where the Men at Work campaign is subscribing. That to say men are not seen as enemies or as responsible. Of course, most of them are responsible, but the strategy is to bring them along and not in terms of accusation. That's why it's very, very important that this strategy is the collaboration. Finally, men like challenge. If you tell a man that this is very difficult, you cannot do it, the man will say, let me try it. So we are presenting, it's like an ego thing. So the strategy says, okay, men, this is, you like challenge, this is a challenge. Take it and run with it. And men says, what? Let's run with it. So that's why we have a lot of men partners that says, we want to take the gender equality thing as our personal challenge.
Okay. Lady Rosa, I've grown up in this country. And when you're around men, the conversations are, you've got to work very hard. Because if you're equal to your wife, what kind of man are you? If she makes equal or more than you are, then you can't even come here to talk. So it seems as if equality is seen as a negative thing. And some also raise up girls, like we said, for a subordinate role. You can't work too hard because if you succeed, have a PhD, who will marry you? So you're not supposed to go too up, because if you go that far up, then you're going to be at a disadvantage. This is what we are going to change, or we seek to change. It's Herculean, this. but doable.
I think it's absolutely doable, and I really appreciate the fact that my colleague Maxime went back in history to show how we have evolved. And that was why I on purpose went back to see, look how far back Sweden went before girls were allowed into school. There is nothing that is static. And I think that actually what COVID-19 has done has given us an opportunity to pause as societies and as communities and to review our rules of engagement. It's an opportunity to do so. So now that we can no longer shake hands when we greet each other, what else do we need to do differently? We are discussing about the fact that the economy has to be different. It has to look at renewable energies. It has to look at technology. But then what about the values that inform the way we behave? This notion that equality is negative is something that has to change. We must promote equality as something positive. I'm the mother of 2 boys. And what I'm raising them to be is partners of the women they will love and marry. And I'm teaching them that there's respect and dignity in contributing to the home. So they cook and they do chores because I want them to get used to doing it now. If we don't start from now, later it will not be absolutely possible.
Talking about raising boys, I cannot tell you how many lashes of the cane I took to learn to cook. I suffered to learn to cook. When it burnt, you repeated it for a week. And she kept saying that you will bother people's daughters when they are pregnant because you can't cook. So learn it. Oh, bless her soul. She is somewhere in Chicago. Well, I think her methods, they got the job done. We can discuss them on another occasion. We'll introduce Lady Angela Nakafero, who is a Commissioner Gender within the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. And at least for this occasion, she is the Honourable Minister, Incarnate. Incarnate. I have to insist. What sort of men are we targeting when we say men at work? And by the end of 3 years, what do you want to be seeing changing, at least here in Uganda, by around 2023?
Well, maybe a more general answer to your question. First to say that, in Sweden, as Rosa Malango was telling us, it has been a process also for Sweden, okay. And we don't have, we still have work to be done in Sweden as well, but we have seen the benefits of more women in the workforce, a more equal society, where also fathers take greater responsibility for bringing up a child and participating in the developing of the child. And women are half of the population, even more than half of the world's population. And it's clearly benefits, social, economical. The GDP will go up if you have more women in the workforce. And but what I think is key in every country is education.
Okay.
To keep the girls in schools, because what we see here in Uganda and many African countries and elsewhere as well is that it's a rather high rate of dropouts.
Okay.
And to keep the girls in schools will prevent them from getting pregnant early on, prevent them from early marriages. And I think if they finish the school, they will be more independent individuals.
Okay.
So I think, I'm sorry I didn't answer your question, but that's a key message that I would like to send.
Okay.
Because I think it's so very important.
Lady Angela, thank you so much for coming to the conversation. I will begin with, my sister went to work in the United States and graduated as an engineer. And she went with her boss to a project. And so they get to the room, she is introduced. It didn't help that she's black, young, and a woman. So when she is introduced as the engineer, at the conversation, the other gentleman asks, I said, I asked you to come with your engineer. And he says, yeah, I came with him. I mean her boss. He said, no, there's nobody beyond her. And then he began to apologize. He started to see where the problem was. But if I could, at the risk of seeming to trivialize this, in Uganda, it is known that she washes his underwear, and women are raised to do that. I doubt there is a man, even if he does it, who can stand up boldly and say, I wash my wife's underwear. That's anathema. Is that typical where we are, where we want to come out of?
Indeed, thank you very much, Samson.
I could see the discomfort even of the cameraman as I gave the the illustration. What are you talking about?
Samson, you're right. We have a real gender division of labor. There's typical roles that are defined for women. We have typical roles that are defined for boys. We also have typical roles that are defined for men. Surprisingly, in most of our communities, most of the roles within the household are being defined for women and girls. Of course, as His Excellency is emphasizing, it's coming in as a cost. Cost to so many other different rights of women and girls. A cost to right to education, a cost to right to leisure. Women don't relax at all. A cost to sexual reproductive health. So, and a cost to Uganda ending poverty. You give me so many roles, multiple roles, I don't rest, yet you expect me to contribute to national development. Alongside those roles, you don't give me the resources that are required for me to perform. So you find that it doesn't stop at women, it's intergenerational, and it's affecting the entire nation at large. So these roles will have to reflect back and try to find ways where we can ensure that men and boys share the roles that are defined
so
for
do I
women.
hear you saying that if we are serious about developing Uganda, we have to change how we see Ugandan women? We have to change the roles we have ascribed to them, and we have to give a new role to men. I'm talking about positive masculinity and role models, because one of the things I want to hear from you, do we want to hear men also being bold enough and saying, I have done this at my house? Because if I say it, some people will be, that's a weakling. How could you get a top leader in this country ask the question, what sort of man fails to manage his home, meaning manage his wife? I will not mention, I don't remember who exactly that was, but I remember somebody very, very huge asking that sort of question. I don't know whether you remember who it was. Do you want to mention them?
Indeed, Samson, we need a transformation of the roles of women, men, of women and men, boys and girls. And of course, when men come in positively to support, the game is completely different. Because in most cases, it has been women talking. You're giving me a lot of work, you don't give me resources, you're giving me responsibilities, and of course, you're leaving the entire household for me to manage, yet you're absent. So you find that when men come into the discussion, this is going to change so many different things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Maxim, I want to bring you back to something you mentioned. Maybe part of our audience is just coming. You said that wherever there has been an oppressed group, those not being oppressed took the initiative on behalf of the oppressed to change the game. And because it's the women suffering the most, men have to take the initiative, not to say, those are women things, let them push the agenda, bring it to our tables, then we will consider if there is time to discuss those women things. I think it is now our thing.
I need to correct something. I didn't say on behalf. I said in support.
In support.
Yes, because you can't do something on behalf of the people who are the most concerned by the issue. They understand better and they are better placed to do it. So the role of the men is not to come and act on behalf, but to come and support. So that's what we are doing. And I'll take the opportunity of your question to say a lot of men coming up and say, okay, I'm a good man. What should I do? Because, you know, one thing to do is one thing, but knowing exactly what to do can be a challenge for some people. Because they usually say, we suffer not from the bad people, but we also suffer from the good people not doing anything. Because it's not just enough to be a good man, it's also important to be an active man. So I will suggest 3 things. 1, at the workplace, a lot of people don't know what to do. I'm a good person. I own a company. What should I do? Okay, internally, you need to support your employees that are female in terms of opportunity.
Okay.
If they are downstairs, you move them to upstairs. If they cannot go upstairs, you train them so that they have the capacity to operate upstairs. Number 2.
Is that in response to what you said, that once you do that, you will notice that your company will start to do better?
Absolutely, because, you know, I was saving that for the end. Women are more faithful employees. They are more faithful consumers. They are more faithful partners in business. They pay loans more than men. So, I mean, engaging women in business is a win-win situation. Okay. The president, who is promoting gender equality, will be happy with you. Your own business will be happy with you. So it's like, it's a win-win situation. That is the business. You go now to the town. You say, in town, we see a lot of people in the transport system, in the market system, in the entertainment industry that are attacked, raped in town. We have a lot of boda that are witnesses, that are not doing anything maybe. Okay. So when you are a good man in town, what is expected of you is to act. Not to say, I'm not responsible, it's not me, and I will never do something like that. Okay. That's good, but that's not enough. Okay. Now we move to the house. We need collectively, that's why I want to praise Ugandan for not just taking the global he for she like that, but say we need to domesticate it. Okay. The he for she has to be consistent with our culture in Uganda. So we are now collectively redefining the concept of a strong man. Okay. So when we say a strong man, we are working with the Boxing Federation of Uganda. We are working with the Ugandan police. Those are places where you find strong men. Okay. So those are the people that are now going to define with us in Uganda, locally, the concept of a strong man. Okay. Are you a strong man when you beat your wife? In some other countries, they will bring you to a room, they'll put 4 big men in that room, they say, you can fight, now fight. Okay. It's not your wife that you are going to fight in the room. You know, so a strong man, and you will see in some martial art people, there's black belts that are, you know, strong, they don't fight. Okay. They never fight. You push them, they will smile. That is a strong man. So that is what we want to get to collectively in Uganda.
Okay. Your Excellency Rosa, there are men watching at home, and they like these messages. They're watching with their daughters, they're watching with their wives, and they are saying probably now, after the show ends, what are some of the things I can do to show that I'm already taking in the messages and I'm willing to support the campaign so that my daughters know that I'm a strong man? What do you want them to do right away now that we're still rolling and we're beginning to roll?
Samson, thank you very much. And this is a very important conversation. I think there's 3 things that I want to say. When I heard you talk about the experience of your sister, I challenged every single woman who's watching right now if that hasn't happened to you. Let me tell you about what happened to me despite being here. UN Resident Coordinator appointed by the UN Secretary General, credentials presented to the President of the Republic. I arrived at an event and they asked me, where is the Resident Coordinator? Because it just couldn't be me.
No, wait a minute. Where was that? In Nigeria?
No, right here.
You arrived
and they were looking at my bodyguards trying to figure out where was the Resident Coordinator.
Because you couldn't be.
It couldn't be me. There's no way that it was that black woman coming. Are you kidding me? No. So if we're having a conversation about what to do, what do you do at home? What do you do when you go to the marketplace? What do you do when you're at a meeting? Do you second guess the women who are there because they're there? Or do you respect that if they're there, they must have studied, they must have done something to be able to deserve the same respect for the office and the function that they carry? So that will be my number one conversation that will be really good to have as we start. The second one is, I think it's very important for us to realize this is a values discussion.
Okay.
We are talking about what are our values. We're talking about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable as a person, an individual, and a citizen. And here, as much as you're talking about Uganda, unfortunately, we see this in a lot of places. So, but that's no excuse. So, which are the values that we are talking about? Which are the values? How is respect and dignity going to be passed on? And where does it apply? The last point that I wanted to make is when we made reference to the impact of women on the socioeconomic stage, and as Maxime was saying, what do I do? Well, when you are at home as a man and you are thinking about with your wife how you're organizing the future of your kids, do you look at the kids the same? Are you planning for them the same? Or you're saying the boy takes this and the girls take that? And by the way, you have the right to do things differently because, for example, my father did. So what decisions are you taking on that one? And to the government, we've been working with the government right now. We applaud the fact that they've been discussing the adjustment of the budget to COVID-19. But we have brought to their attention that 80% of the women and youth which they are looking for, the vulnerable, they're in the informal economy. And they cannot access this beautiful stimulus package that is there as it is today. So again, what are we collectively going to do to make sure that those women and youth are not left behind as we come up with a stimulus package for the new economy going forward?
Okay, very interesting there. And on matters inheritance here, what I hear in families where there are boys and girls, I'm a stranger to that conversation because I don't have boys, thankfully. What I hear is, if you give it to the girl, she gets married and takes your family wealth into another family, so the family loses it, or the clan loses it, since after marriage she belongs somewhere else. Those are the conversations that are going on. But this is changing and saying, if you want the family to grow, raise both of them equally. If she goes with the wealth to another family, it's still in Uganda. You don't lose anything. Paul, is that what we're saying? Rosa, is that what we're saying?
We had this conversation the other day with His Excellency the President when the EU ambassador and I went to talk to him about Spotlight.
Yes.
And we told him, Mr. President, we need you to champion this issue of zero tolerance of violence against women and girls.
He's
and
got 3 girls.
He asked us, and he said, but can we go back and have a discussion about where this started? Yes. And he said, back in the day, that clan issue was important because it was geographical, your wealth was with you. Yeah. We are talking about digital wealth, for goodness sake. So that can no longer apply. That means that if your girls have your wealth, regardless of where they are, it belongs to the family. So actually you're adding the wealth. So if your daughter marries all the way even in China, now your family wealth expands from Uganda to China. So that notion is one of those notions that has to evolve. It does not justify. And let me add one more point. You can say what you want about girls going away when they marry or not. When the parents fall sick, they go to their daughter's house. So please, this whole story about is with the boys, they're not there. I'm the first of 4. Yeah. My brothers are all 3. When everything is okay, that's where my mom's at. When she needs help, she's in my house. So that whole thing of we don't give it to the girl because at the end of the day, she will be the one nurturing you, Samson, in your old age.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Paul, your concluding remarks as we get into stream 2, Paul. Yeah, your concluding remarks as we get into the second stream.
Well, just to say that it has been a very interesting discussion, but I actually read one article today. It was in the paper about sexual harassment,
Yes.
sexual abuse in a family. And again, I mean, I think this is an expression of the subordinated position that the girls have in families. It's about power relations, and this is something that we would like to address.
Okay.
And it's a process, of course, but of course, something that we would like to change.
Okay. Angela, did you get any inheritance yet? Or have you even been brought into the picture? Or, it's only, or is it only your brothers?
My father did.
Okay.
And I'm proud that he did.
Okay.
And of course, as Her Excellency Rosa is saying,
Did his community understand what he was making? Or was he also one of the mad ones?
is among the mad ones so far.
Okay. The good men.
Yeah.
Back then were called mad men, controversial men. He's one of the good ones we're talking about.
Exactly, and
Okay.
that's why we are saying that men and boys, we need to use our power, your power, because I'm not a man. Use your power to protect women's rights. Use your power to redefine the dignity of women. Because if we continue redefining the dignity of women as those who are circumcised, as those who don't have resources, as those who are not educated, we are not taking our country any further.
Okay. Very interesting. Angela Nakafelo is a commissioner within the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Pat Lingard is the Swedish ambassador to Uganda. Rosa Malango is the resident coordinator, even when some still ask for her boss. She has her credentials presented on television, but they've still asked her for a boss. That's very, very, very common here. And Dr. Maxime Winato, who is the UN Women country rep here. I like the fact that UN Women has a man in charge, a good man in charge there. We are going to be discussing cities that are friendly to women. That's the second conversation. I'm very uncomfortable when a woman gets out to jog and she's dressed like all men do, and then people have all sorts of issues about her. And how about this? Men can move around in shorts. Nothing wrong with it. Shorts, like shorts. And then she moves around with a skirt a little above her knee. And there's hula baloo. I mean, he also has a mini of sorts. Why isn't there a conversation? But if we are coming to that conversation in the next stream. Keep on the conversation. I'll hand you back to Mordecai Murisa, another good man.
As part of the global He for She movement, UN Women, part of the UN family in Uganda, invite you to a two-day e-conference aimed at launching the Men at Work for Gender Equality campaign. Her Excellency, Ms. Rosa Malango. Ms. Rosa Malango has been the United Nations Resident Coordinator and Designated Official for Security in Uganda since 2016. She is the highest ranked representative of the UN in Uganda. She has 25 years of experience working with the UN in Angola, Mozambique, Ethiopia, Ivory Coast, Guatemala, and UN headquarters in New York. Join her and other keynote speakers.
Understanding challenges women face at workplace, and we are going to expand more on this, understanding them and finding a way forward. Of course, I will start with Ms. Alpha Tua. Of course, let us know what are these challenges?
All right, so thank you very much, Mordecai, for this introduction. I want to say thank you to UN Women and to the organizers, the private sector, the government for the leadership, and also to thank the men at work who are doing a great job, the private sector people, the religious leaders, the community leaders, and also to even appreciate our own administrator, Kim Stein, and UNDP, who as a result of his leadership, we do have 50-50 parity now in senior management. So basically, what are we talking about? What are the challenges that we're talking about based on the issues that you have raised? There are a couple of things that women are facing. We need to look at issues around patriarchal structures that are entrenched, that give men sort of priority over women. And a number of things, the social norms, the cultural norms,
You take the case of stereotyping, for example, which is a typical thing that women face at work. And I recall that in public speaking events like this, I would speak, and then people would say, "Oh, that was very excellent," but the Patrick is ambitious. So these are the kind of things we're talking about. We are talking about challenges to do with sometimes when you have to be promoted, and I've been in situations like that where your supervisor would say, we are going on mission next week, and we can be together, trying to say that if you want to get a promotion, then you need to do something. These are the challenges that women face at work. We have challenges where we have gender gaps in terms of pay, where women and men are doing the same type of job, but then the men earn more. Where women are not at the center of decision making and very peripheral to the conversations that are happening. And sometimes when they are there, it's perceived as tokenism. Just have one person there just to show that there is a woman there. So the challenges that we're talking about in workplace are quite huge. It has to do with issues to do with salary, it has to do with sexual-based violence, it has to do with even the issue around maternity. I mean, when women go for maternity, for example, which they're entitled to, sometimes you come back and people think that you're not being competent enough because you have to go and breastfeed, for example. I mean, these are real challenges that we're talking about. And the reason why this conversation matters is that after 25 years from Beijing, we're still talking about these issues that need to dismantle some of these patriarchal structures and systems and institutions that we're talking about. But importantly, since I'm going to be talking more from a development point of view, why this matters now is that you cannot achieve Vision 2040, you cannot achieve the National Development Plan 3, you cannot achieve the things that we want to achieve with the Sustainable Development Goals if you don't look at issues around, not even only about the SDG number 5 when we all look at it, but if you look at SDG 8, for example, which is about decent work and economic growth, you will need to be able to empower women and bring the conversation to the fore where women and men are actively participating in that space to make sure that you are able to achieve organizational performance, organizational effectiveness, profitability. These are all issues that bear on that.
Well, let me come to you, Mr. Patrick. She talks about women being assertive. When do we draw a line between being assertive and being humble? Because you will accept with me, like she said, in our societies, women are taught because of culture to be submissive. How do we draw a line between the two?
Allow me to take off my mask. A very good afternoon, and thank you to UN Women for organizing this. And a special thanks because you have involved men to talk about this issue. It's all too often left to women to address the gender issues, and they make noise, and we got used to that noise. But now I am proud to be amongst the men trying to lead the way, where we have a responsibility, we have a role to play to bring about this equality that is so often talked about. Now, there's a difference in different types of masculinity. There is bad masculinity, and that I call toxic masculinity. That is bad. Now, where are we as Uganda? We're not doing too badly as a country compared to other similar countries. I say the African nations under the AU or under the UN umbrella. We're not doing too bad, but still we are on the other side of the needle. We are not at a point where we should be. We have a lot of work to do to bring about gender balance and to bring down toxic masculinity. Is a term used to describe exaggerated behaviors that one would normally associate with male actions, such as being overly competitive or overly aggressive, how one deals with other people, and being in denial of your emotions, softer emotions of sympathy, of kindness, of crying when you lose somebody. A man is not supposed to cry. Those kind of perceptions are archaic, and the time has passed. And as a nation, countries are always evolving. Humankind has always... People in the Western world, from Finland and the Scandinavian countries, are not that they are more refined. They have evolved at a faster pace. We need to evolve too and encourage the women in our society to take their rightful place in society. And today I emphasize the workplace. where it is so dominated by men. At the board level, at senior management level, at middle level, it's maybe at the lower level that's not enough, but even there, it is still dominated by men. So we've got to change. And what we're asking for the men, from the men, is to tone down that masculinity that is a cake. We must have a masculinity where it is fair to be polite. You don't have to shout. I run a big organization, and my demeanor, my management style, I don't go shouting and terrorizing everybody to show that I am the boss. You enter a place, you find me in my office sweeping the floor in my office. And they say, no, don't, chairman, don't. No, but it's okay to take the dust up if it's something that I want to do. It doesn't take away anything from me to make me less. At my home, I finish eating and I can take the plate to the kitchen as a role model to my children, so they don't think that's a woman's job. So you've got to tone down our attitude and get the right attitude. And I think that's where the heart of the discussion should be for men at work, our attitude. Now, what is attitude? Too often we use that word in a notional way. We don't go to the real meaning of attitude. So I read somewhere something that was interesting, and I thought I would share it today with the men in Uganda, if you can allow me.
Please.
It comes down to our attitude. What really is our attitude? Your attitude, because when I'm interviewing somebody, you come in my office and I've got to interview so many young people. I know you've got a degree. I know you've got the credentials. You've got some skills. I'm trying to find what your attitude is to life. Your attitude is the advancement or manifestation of our true selves. That is what your attitude is. It's the roots. Its roots are inward facing, but its fruits are outward facing. It's our best friend or our worst enemy. Your attitude. It's more honest and consistent than our words. It's an outward look based upon past experiences. That's what helps you form your attitude. It is very honest. It's even more honest and consistent than your words, as I've said. It's the thing that draws people to us or makes people repel us. You have a good attitude or a bad attitude. It's never content until it is properly expressed. People with attitude will want to always express their attitude. It will eventually come out. It's never content. It will have to find its way. It's actually the librarian of our past. It is the speaker of the present. And it's the prophet of our future. So your attitude is very important. It's an outward expression of your inward feelings. So when you dress the attitude of the people, both men and women, and get it on the right position, they know what true north is, then you're starting to make progress. But if we have this attitude that women have got to always be condescending, cook for us, wash the clothes, do this kind of things, we'll never see them as equal partners. And we're losing a big opportunity. Women bring balance in the corporate world. Their appetite for risk is completely different. The way they see things is different, and they bring that balance. What they need from us is our respect. Give them an opportunity and let them try. And if they fail once or twice, it's okay. Who doesn't fail? We learn more from failure. It's okay to fall once in a while, but pick yourself up. The lesson is what's important. Learn the lesson from when you slip and fall. So I think Uganda is on the right trajectory, and we need to do a lot more. I welcome this initiative by UN. They are coming from the UN to come and help us organize ourselves as Ugandans. It is almost pitiful.
Let me cross over to Ms. Emma Mugisha. There's a conversation, of course, on the streets. You come from Stanbic Bank, that every time you have to have people on counters in bank, there should be women. And they always attach it with funny comments why they always put women to do the teller work. You will have to expand more on this. And then let me know, we are talking about civilization and the 21st century. What is still stopping us from getting there?
Okay, I'll pick up my mask. So, to start with, I'll say at Stanbic Bank, we don't only have tellers we don't only have ladies at the till. We will open it up for whoever makes it for that role. But I'm appreciative of this space to be able to talk about this, because I think it is important. And your first question is why would we prefer women at the tills? Why do society think that way? I think there's a bit where service is very important at the till, right? Good service is important at the till. And women have tended to be very good at service. So you find that, yes, there'll be probably the best tellers will end up being women because they're able to give a good service. But that's not the criteria of our hiring process. criteria of a hiring process is open to anybody, and whoever gets the job gets it. And I don't have the statistics on the tellers in particular, but at the lower level in Stanbic, we have a 50-50 gender composition, but it is also goes right through the ranks. So at EXCO, we actually just tipped the curve now. We are at 70% women compared to the men, which is a good thing because it is our time. Let's take it and let's roll and let's do well. And I'm sure we will do well. But that has been a conscious effort by the bank to actually get there. So Standard Bank as a group joined the He for She program about 4 years ago. And there's actually targets on how to get women, how to get gender balance at all levels of the bank. So all the way to executives, to a board, and to CE, even number of CEs of the different countries of Standard Bank. So Uganda has gone right ahead. As I said, on EXCO, we are more than 70%. Our CE right now is a woman. First woman CE of Uganda, of the biggest bank in Uganda. So that, for me, is a big thing. But also on our board, we have more women than men on our board for Standard Bank, for Stanbic Uganda. So, and this didn't come without, it didn't come automatically or by mistake. So our past CE, Patrick Yonimsek, was very intentional to say we want more women on the table because there's a business case to have more women on the table. The bank will actually be, like you said, there's a balance, we'll make more money. And that is coming to pass. So he put together a program that has seen all of us, most of us, come up and actually sit at the executive table. So it can't happen automatically, it has to be intentional and it has to go through a process. That doesn't mean that we were not qualified and were given a women ticket. No, we had to fight for the role and we had to win, right? So there were other men that, competed for the roles, and because we had been given, that opportunity, we were able to get onto the table. So how are we as a, community getting to become more, what did you call it, more
Gender sensitive.
Gender sensitive. We all have to make an effort. We all have to make an effort. Like we said, we come from backgrounds that probably got us differently. I must say, I grew up in a feminist man's home, so my father did not distinguish between the boys or the girls, and he gave all of us an opportunity to do what we must. He taught me how to change a tire, he taught me how to drive. Okay, my brother probably drove when he was 10 because he took more risks than I did. But by the time I was 18, I was driving, and so we need the men as well to raise their daughters, to create spaces for their daughters to grow up in a space where they can take risks, where they can, have a voice, speak up, and to be confident and be competitive, to want to get to where we want to be as a society. So it starts with all of us bringing up creating the right level of community and family to bring up the next generation.
Well, I'll come to you, Ms. El Fatua. How do we make sure that in doing so, we do not drive a would-be good cause out of proportion? You've had conversation where they say that I am a woman, and because of the campaign of gender equality, I will not do this for my man. So how do we balance between the two?
Sorry, I just need to understand your question again. Balance what?
I'm trying to ask. How do we drive this campaign, and it's not out of proportion because it is perceived by other people in a different way, that because of this campaign, gender equality, I will not do this for my man. Do we have specific things that women do or are supposed to do for a man?
Well, first, I don't think we have to shift the conversation. The conversation is about men at work. So
Yes.
let's focus on that. Because I don't want it to be what women should do, because otherwise we change the dynamics of the conversation.
Okay.
And I don't think we are going out of proportion. There's nothing about going out of proportion. It's an advocacy to really rectify something that is wrong. Okay. Even if you take the concept or the construct, men at work.
Yes.
When we see men at work, what are they doing? They're either building, they're painting, they're doing something. But there are women too there, but nobody talks about the women at work. And that's what we're trying to change by making sure that the men get more engaged in that process. So what can we do? There are a couple of things that we have to do, Mordecai. One, men and both women, we have to break the silence. That's very, very important. In other words, don't keep quiet. And that's part of the advocacy campaign that we're having now. Martin Luther said something which is very, very important. I mean, he said, alas, it is not the words of our enemies that we remember, but the silence of our friends. In other words, if you don't do anything about it, like Maxim said, I'm a good man, but I'm not doing it, it doesn't help the cause. So we all need to get engaged in different ways to make sure that the cause, which is that there is gender equality, there is gender equity at the end of the day, which is good for not only the families, but also for the country as a whole, is something that we push across. So it's quite important. The second thing, which I wanted to build on what Amos said, is that we need to be deliberate. We need to structure engagement and opportunities around that. And for us in UNDP, for example, we have what we call the Gender Equality Seal. And I'm glad that both NBS and Stanbic and then Simba Group are all part of this. Now, what are we talking about? What we are basically doing is that we are providing a tool that allows private sector companies to be systematic and deliberate about how they do gender equality. So the issue of proportionality doesn't come in because you have to put systems in place to be able to do that. Now, what do? We ensure that issues around pay are discussed so that you don't pay a woman less than a man. That's the first thing. You also issues around, work-life balance. Because sometimes by the time a woman is coming to the office, he actually finished one job in the house before coming in. You see what I mean? How do you balance all these things? So issues around protocols around, sexual-based issues, you have to have certain strict protocols. You don't see a woman, oh, you're looking good today. This kind of, it doesn't help any of us. So it's important that we structure the engagement, we structure the conversations around that. The third thing that is important, again, I don't think when you do advocacy, for example, you're going out of proportion, okay? And that women need to temper some of the things they do. That's what you're trying to say. I don't think we should shift the conversation. Awareness creation and capacity building is important. If you don't understand the issues properly, you can't do anything about it. In fact, my teacher taught me and said, understanding the question in itself is a pass in itself. You understand? You have to understand that there are issues we have to deal with. And that sort of advocacy engagement is very, very important. Where the church is involved, we should talk about it. In the mosque, we should talk about it. We should talk about it in the village committees. We should talk about it everywhere. And the women should also be able to speak. So when the woman speaks, it shouldn't be seen out of proportion. That's what you're saying. No, is that we are collectively bringing the issue for the good of the family, for the good of society, for the good of the nation. And these are things that we have to talk about. We cannot leave them to somebody else to do. Both women and men have to do that. And perhaps one of the things which we have talked about, it hasn't come out very strongly, is around our post-COVID work. Because I know that that's part of the conversation. And Patrick, we're talking about it, how is business doing? We know that COVID has impacted the informal sector. And the informal sector is predominantly also where you have women there. And therefore, part of the advocacy that we are having now is not just about let more women be there and let them be in decision making and make sure that they're in the boardrooms. It's also about the future of the country as we look at development. They have to play a critical role in terms of resilience building, which is also about economic resilience that we are talking about. So anyway, there are different ways that we have to look at it. Now to come back specifically to your question. Would it be seen as going out of proportion if women, drive this agenda? I think one of the ways to look at it is partnership between men advocacy groups, women advocacy groups. So it's not as if that the women are alone drumming, saying that we need help, but we're actually working together. And I'm glad people like Patrick are taking the leadership role and other men are to work as well, where collectively we can work. So nobody is seeing that, oh, these are women, they're making noise again, it's them again. No, that collectively we are working together as a team. So I just don't want that conversation to be about what should women do differently so that they are not out of proportion, but really about what we can do together. But importantly, the subject matter on positive masculinity that Patrick had been defining, and to see the role that men can play in terms of positioning the issues around gender equality, which is very important for our own country and really for our future. So this is what I wanted to say in terms of responding to your question. I don't think we should be looking at, because that's part of the stereotyping that I talked about, that we need to be able to push back. Because you say, oh, they're talking too much, so maybe you should find a way of not talking about it too much. No, we can't do that. We have to talk about it, and we have to join hands with the men in media and others to make sure that these conversations stay with us, that it's not just a one-off. It is good for our families, like I said, it's good for the community. For example, you look at SDG 16 on peace and security. We're going to have elections very soon. You would see the role that women will play. It is important that we continue to support that advocacy role of women in different parts of development. And again, this is where collectively, together with the men, we can achieve something together. So finally, let me just say that we cannot achieve what we want to achieve without the full engagement of men. And so it's not only a women's cause, it's both men and women, and we have to drive it together.
Well, Mr. Patrick, what are the where are companies or bosses missing out in playing when it comes to ensuring equality at work?
I don't know that they are missing out. It's maybe what Elsie talked about, this silence. We see things going wrong and we are silent about it. Sexual harassment, most companies today have got policies against it, but we seem to downplay it. It's just in the book. Unless you go and bring out the manual and check what does sexual harassment mean, nobody addresses it. I'm sure Stanbic does, Umeme does, nearly every company in the private sector foundation, at least it's registered. Even the companies that are small, they have a policy about it, but we kind of allow it to happen. And that's where we talk about the silence of good people. Makes us complicit. When a boda sees something is going wrong and he doesn't stop. A woman is being raped on the street in daylight, and they see, oh, and they say, it's not me, and they go away. No, that's not good enough. We've got to change our values. We've got to raise awareness. If there's one thing that comes out of this initiative by UN, because it will end in 3 years, and how will we measure it? The results must be, we have raised awareness. With a capital A, big awareness across the board. In schools, from young age, all the people must be trained and their values must change. Raising awareness about gender equality. We must take an audit of where we are. Another capital A. We must audit our moves, our values, cultural, religious, tribal, ethnic, whatever it is, our values must come somehow converge towards what is acceptable today. What has happened in the past is not good enough. There were too many bad habits. The next one is action, again with a capital A. We need to be seen to be doing something about it. If somebody is sexually harassing a colleague in the office, and you see it, don't keep quiet. Take action, stand up for it. And if the woman stands up, they think she's so pro-feminism. No, you don't have to downplay it. And if they make a dirty joke about women, don't laugh. Make it clear. Don't be embarrassed that this is not acceptable. Don't be part of that group. You don't do things like that. We've got to change our values. It's the only way we can uplift our society. Lastly, accountability. We must hold people accountable when they do things like this. Coming in and bullying everybody and thinking you can get away with it, it is wrong. Stand up for that. We have the most powerful man in our country. Clearly, he's our president. He's a man of humility. He doesn't raise his voice that often. When he declared the lockdown, he talked very calmly. He said, this will not happen. And it happened. He's got all the power, but he's with humility. You see the way he respects people, big or small. How he conducts himself, how he escorts his wife and holds her out. But he's leading by example. That's a role model. All of us in business should do the same. Be gentle, not just at home and not just in public. Do it all the time. Our values must be that, because it affects our attitude. And you can't dress it up. I'm not asking people to go out and do drama. I want us to change our values. It won't happen overnight. It's a process. But let's make a target. Within 3 years, the people of Uganda should be at a different level. There are global benchmarks that will be looked at. And they'll see how we conduct our affairs. The government has taken an initiative, and there are many women today in legislative positions, especially in parliament. That's in parliament. In the judiciary, there are many more women now as judges. And then in the executive side, there are women in key positions. If you look at cabinet and the permanent secretaries, a lot of them are there. What about us in the private sector? We have got to do the same. If anything, we should lead the way ahead of the public sector. We need to have more women at the board making decisions. We need to have more women in EXCO, executive management, making the decisions. And don't do it just because they are women. Where they've not got the training, the support, send them out, train them, skill them, bring in mentors. Let's make sure we transform our society. Kenya is doing it. Rwanda is doing it. Don't be left behind. If you think, it's okay, we're Uganda, no. When I see during this COVID, it brought out the worst of men. Gender-based violence kind of peaked in Uganda. It was embarrassing to hear that. And it is disheartening. Why? When you spend more time with your wife and children, do you become more violent? I'd like to think it's because of economic hardship. Men were venting their anger and they were becoming temperamental. Economic hardship. I could live with that a little bit, but we should learn.
No, we shouldn't live with that.
No, I'm not saying live with that. I'm saying it's a better excuse than saying that just because you're tired of seeing your wife staying her in the face. But because people had a lot of pressure, maybe that's the reason why. But it's not acceptable. We've got to learn through thick and thin. Good health, bad health, poverty and riches. Stick with your people. That's your family. There's another country somewhere at the tip of this continent, I won't mention which country it is, where rape has become unacceptable. Even our big brothers in Nigeria, they haven't passed laws about rape. What is it about? Human beings. In this day and age, 2020, COVID has come as an equalizer. We are all human beings, we are all vulnerable. And then you start molesting the other side? That is actually molesting them. You don't molest one another. So I think we have a good lesson to learn. I want to thank wholeheartedly United Nations, Women Organization, and all the UN big family for driving this agenda, because it's not an easy agenda to drive. It needs resources. They are putting money behind it to make sure we raise this awareness. Let it be not in vain.
Well, can I come back on the point of Patrick, because I want to take you on this on Patrick, because
okay, in a minute, yes.
Yeah, because I don't think we can excuse on economic grounds. In fact, on economic grounds, women have suffered some more than the men, and if anything at all, then it should be the reverse, which is not. And so people are just trying to be advantageous. You know, you find a woman walking by herself, at night, and then, this kind of thing that are happening, which shouldn't happen. So we need to put the spotlight on, sexual and gender-based violence and put a stop to it. In the UN family, we do have a joint program, which is called the Spotlight Program, and that's what we are trying to do. And I think this is not something that it has to be a 3-year thing. We need to continue advocating that there should not be gender-based violence, sexual-based violence, because it shouldn't happen. And in the COVID era, like you're saying, we have seen that, it brought the West, we have seen, gender-based violence increase. Out of proportion. Why should this thing happen? So I think in many ways, to come back to the point that you raised, we need to go back to our values. And the value system, which also has our traditional values. We do have traditional values, our Ubuntu Bulam, all these things that are there, we need to go back to them and really connect to the human being as a human being. Not to say that, I've seen you, you are vulnerable and therefore I'm taking advantage of, which shouldn't happen. So I just thought I'll try and differ a bit with Patrick on that particular point. But I agree with you that on issues around accountability, we need to be accountable. I'm glad that the private sector, the work that we are doing with you on the gender equality seal, and now we do have 43 companies that we're working with. The most recent one that was certified was Stanbic Centenary Bank, and also the Commercial Bank of Africa, and we do have Uganda breweries that have come on. But I do hope that some of these tools and systems in place can be adapted by different institutions who can be able to be much more deliberate about what we're talking about.
And yes, indeed, I will be, of course, talking about what you said. Every time you have to be silent in times of oppression, you're actually standing with the oppressor. So I really understand. And yes, I accept. Well, I'll come to you, Ms. Mugisha. If I may ask, where do you see this is a huge campaign, 3-year campaign? How do you want a workplace to look like after 3 years and beyond?
So, to start with, if any of the companies out there haven't yet gotten onto the seal process, they need to. The last 1 year that we've been on the program, we've actually reevaluated some things that we thought were doing well, but reevaluated that and realized we could do better. So to start with, if all the private sector companies can join the UN on the UN seal, I think that would be a very good outcome in 3 years. But again, to be able to get that gender balance across all sectors in the market is also an outcome that would be brilliant. If we look at banks, for example, I think it's only 2 banks out of 26 that have female CEs. So a 50% would be brilliant in 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
If you look at your big corporates, we can really count the ones that are led by women on our fingers, literally. So yes, there are women out there that can lead these corporates. And I was just talking to Patrick that I'm really proud of his daughter. If we can raise our children to be that confident and to be able to take on big responsibilities, our daughters, I mean, that would be brilliant. So mine are still young, but if I can raise them to be mentored by Patrick's daughter, for example, that's setting the stage for tomorrow. So creating the spaces for the women to actually come up would be a very good outcome in 3 years.
Yeah, the conversation is still on. Men at work. This time around, looking at the role of men in fighting this challenge that is global. You know, every time I have to discuss this, because of the African culture, it is brought and looked at as a very small, kind of a small conversation, but it is a very, very big problem or challenge. Mr. Patrick talks about what is happening in a certain country in Africa, and of course, I was reading some papers in Kenya with this lockdown. Around 6,000 young girls who've been at school have been impregnated. Very heartbreaking, very, very, very heartbreaking. And you realize that, you know, the root cause has a lot to do with gender biasness, or a lot of things that are happening, bad things, of course, to women. I'll come back to you. 3 years, she says, she would want to see, probably when it comes to 50% of women actually having the positions, big positions, call them CEOs of banks. Do you see this happening at workplaces in 3 years?
I mean, once there is a will, there is a way. It is possible, it is doable. I mean, I think if Stanbic can do it in a year, and I remember when Anne Jiko was appointed, I actually sent a message to Patrick and I said, well, you know, congratulations, you did well. You know, it is possible. And I mean, Patrick and others are doing the same thing. So we need to just be committed to the cause. If we are committed to the cause, in 3 years, we can see the elevation that we are looking at. And again, it is not elevation, just put a few women up there and then, you know, as tokenism, to have a few people there. You need to look at the whole ecosystem around it, you know, from low frontline managers to middle level managers to the CEOs to the policies in the organization, to the payment, the performance, even how is performance done? You know, if you went on maternity and you came back and your supervisor said, oh, well, you lost about 3 or 4 months and therefore you less satisfactory, that's not good enough. So what we are looking for in 3 years is that it means the corporates have to up the game, the government systems as well, the churches, it needs to be preached by the preacher there, the mosque as well, because it's a societal thing. You can't just say, and we cannot decouple our lives in the corporate from the life in home, the lives in town, and the lives in church. You see what I mean, or the mosque. It is the same person. And therefore, if we can look at this in a continuum where different facets of people's life, we can try to advocate and get them actually to think differently, to do things differently, then we have and we can achieve a lot. And we in the UN are very excited about this particular one. I think it offers us a great opportunity when the country is beginning to look at its National Development Plan 3, which is going to be 5 years. And of that, if we can get performance issues around gender equality across all the 18 programs that the government is going to be implementing for the people, with the people of Uganda, I think we have something to celebrate. And in 3 years, I think we should come back again, Mordecai, and have this conversation again and see where we are. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of things that people can say that we have done right.
Oh, sure. Men at work. Mr. Patrick, I want you to look at that camera. I want you to speak to that lady, that woman who has been pushed, who is challenged, who is not willing to raise her voice because of probably this, the foundation of where she comes from, the culture. Talk to her and tell her that, you know, you can actually be part of the change, or you can be the change.
Thank you, Kalisa. A time has come when we have to shift the ground. It's not going to be business as usual. And if there's one thing I'd like to take advantage of, is this opportunity that COVID presented, where we can press the reset button. Everything can be reset. Women must stand up and speak. Their voice must be heard. And for us, the men, we must listen. Give them that opportunity. Give them that chance to speak and say their part. And then let's see how these opportunities come. There's so much talent out there. What is lacking are the opportunities. And if we keep boxing out these women, don't allow them to have these opportunities, our society will always be held back. A time has come where we've got to raise the stakes. Let the women play their meaningful role. They are an economic part of a big economic part of the country. So in Uganda, it's probably 52% are women and 48% are men. Now, how can we underutilize that horsepower? They've got so much talent. We respect them as a people. We respect them as our mothers. And there, I give credit to Ugandans. Nearly every tribe in Uganda respects a mother, a special role. But that's not enough. A time has come where we've got to empower our women. They should own land. I know it's controversial. They should be allowed, girls should be allowed to inherit property. We cannot stick to the old-fashioned taboos. I've got 2 boys and 2 girls. They all share in everything. And they've all got to compete equally for what they want to do in life. If I'm given the opportunity to be able to pass on what I've acquired for them, to give them that platform. This myth that everything belongs to a boy and it's a boy child has got to go. A country as powerful as India, it's a great nation, has been held back because of that. If they only unlock the full potential of their women, India would be probably at par with USA. But they have not yet recognized that, and they are holding back their societies. Africa, we're in the same boat. Now, as a country in Uganda, we've got to allow our women to live their dreams. Let them aspire for whatever they want and achieve it. Let's make that path and provide an environment that's workable for them. I think it's only fair that we bring about this equity and equitability, this fairness. And the call of the hour now, or the need of the hour, is to ensure that there is this balance. We've had it too good for too long as men. We've bundled our affairs. I'm not saying the women should take the military positions or certain physiological positions that they cannot take, which men have to do. They'll have their roles cut out. But we've got to give them a chance. Because, if anything, women are probably smarter than many of us men.
Okay, that's a huge debate. Well, I'll come to you. There's a very huge problem. She mentioned women, when it comes to the maternal leaves, at times they're afraid to give birth to children because they're afraid that probably when they go for a leave, they might come back when they do not have a job anymore. I want you to talk to the bosses who are bosses to these women, be it men or women, and tell them what are they supposed to do? What is it like? And how are you doing it at Stanbic Bank, where women take leave, maternal leave, and then they assure that when they come back, they still have their jobs?
Okay. So to start with, this is in the law. So you first of all have to be law abiding. The law allows for us to have 90 days of maternity leave as part of the law. So our Stanbic policies definitely are abiding by the law. So you will have a job after the 90 days and you will not be demoted or your job changed. So somebody will actually act in your place for the 3 months. Sometimes it's 4 months because most of us will hold annual leave so that you can stay a bit longer with your baby. But we also have other policies that we put in place. For example, we put spaces for lactating mothers, as we call it. It's one where we haven't found a fancy name for it, but special rooms where you can actually go and breastfeed during the day or pump your milk and keep it till you go home in the evening. So we've created those spaces in our workplace. We've played around with working from home or flexible hours. COVID has just sorted us out. Yeah? I mean, there's no more fear of working from home. We've worked from home for 3 months and we actually have been more effective. So most of us actually are not planning to go back to work full time. There's no reason why I should spend 3 hours in traffic on a daily basis now that I can effectively work from home. So we don't even need to do a policy. COVID has sorted us out. We can work from home and be flexible. If I want to be home at 3 o'clock when my child comes home every day, I can comfortably do that now. I didn't know how to do it before COVID. Now I know how to do it, because I can actually comfortably work from home. So I think COVID has also created an opportunity for us. Most of us have been on conference calls and their children running in the back, and you're in the middle of a serious presentation and someone comes and says, "Mommy, I want some bread." And the organization has had to realize that the lines between home and work have blurred, and we can now accept everybody with their whole family situation. So I think COVID has also created an opportunity to even take that a step further. We already had policies in place that supported the women, and each organization should have, but we've also jumped the fear of working from home, of flexible time, of being a whole person. If I can say, you're a mother, you're a bank executive, you're the same person. So the organization should be able to accept you as you are and help you balance those roles, which are all important.
I want to talk about harassment at workplace. This has happened so many times, and because it is done, of course, to men and women, but because of the culture setup, mostly women, how would be the best way to handle harassment by the victims? This time around, we're talking about women at workplace.
Well, I mean, first, harassment can take different forms. Harassment can be sexual in nature, where people are seeking sexual favors from women. So that's one. Harassment could be the way you even speak to a person, and in a condescending way that you bring the person down. So there are different ways of harassing people. You can harass people by saying, look, if you don't do this, I'm not going to extend your contract. I mean, there are different ways of handling that. I think, like I said, these are things that you have to look at them in a package. That is not the individual who is a victim who needs to defend themselves. There has to be systems in place and processes that organization puts in place to make sure that that person is also protected. So for sure, for any institution, there has to be the policy around that. That's the first thing that has to happen. You also need to ensure that it is not only the policy that is framework that is there, but the individuals in the organization also understand their rights, understand what to do, understand who to report the case to, because sometimes you don't just go and say, this person has harassed me because of fear, and because of sometimes societal issues, you need to find spaces where you can be able to do that. But for the person who has been a victim, whether it's sexual violence or any of those things, we have whistleblower policies where you should be able to talk about it. You should be able to have, take advantage of the systems in place in the organization where you can confine it, be it your supervisor, be it your ombudsman, be it an ethics director, whatever it is, to be able to say what you have to say so that they can also support you. So I think I don't want to put the burden in the UN, for example. We have a whole framework around preventing sexual violence and abuse, where we have committees, we have focal points, we have systems in place to do that. For the individual, certainly, yes, you should be free, and you shouldn't hold back, report the case if you're affected. Make sure that you get the necessary support. The institution should be able to also support you as well, whether it's about counseling, psychosocial support, whatever it is. So the burden is not just on the individual, but the individual should certainly not hold back. When you have been affected by sexual harassment or violence, don't say, I'm afraid that X person would not promote me, and therefore I'm not talking about. No, we can't accept that. So the person needs to come forward, and the system needs to protect the person as well.
Thank you so much. Wonderful conversation here. We just cannot go beyond this. It's been a wonderful conversation, of course, from Mr. Patrick Bitature, happens to be the CEO of Simba Group, then Ms. Alpha Tua.
Atifa.
Oh, Atifa? Oh, I'm missing out on that.
No worry, don't worry.
Yeah, the representative of UNDP, and of course, Ms. Emma Mujisha from Stanbic Bank. Well, if I have anything to say, I will tell you, men who feel privileged because of who you are. I read somewhere where it said, privilege is an emotional commitment to ignorance. And I would say this so many times. It is time to get over that. The sense of feeling that you are someone and the other one is nothing. That is totally wrong. Well, I'll be handing over now to Samson Kasumba in another session, that is Workstream 2, and of course they'll be speaking about making cities safer by underlining and addressing the multiple risks women are facing, and more on that. Back now to you, Samson. Take it over.
Thank you very much, Mordecai Maurice, there finishing off that very interesting session. We continue to have a conversation over men at work and improving ourselves as a society. There is no question, there is no even debate or thought of starting to debate on what will happen to us if we make women more equal. You know what will happen? Uganda will do better. We'll get out of poverty, our GDP will be higher, and we'll certainly experience the sort of development that we have always wanted to experience. And that's why we want to be asking the good men to be making women more equal, the boys to be making girls equal, father getting more involved, and women also being paid, because now what I do know is that there are a lot of things women are doing and not being paid for them, because men say, well, they are women, let them do it. And yet when men do that, they want to be paid for it. Let me introduce my panel here as we discuss workspaces, safe cities, and just letting women be. I do have here Lady Angela Bagene from UWEAL. You will. Is it you will or you will? You will. Who is you will?
Uganda Women Entrepreneurs Association.
Okay.
We have the entire women fraternity in business.
Okay, and we'll be talking about women, especially those in the informal sector, the entrepreneurs doing tomatoes and things, and how their relationship with our good friend here, Francis Ogweng from the Uganda Police Forces. Interesting conversation with you on making city space for women to work. But thank you so much for being on the show. Assistant Superintendent of Police there. We do have Dr. Karusa Kiragu from UNAIDS. Doc, it's certainly a pleasure having you on.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Very interesting there. Thank you for coming. Have you ever introduced yourself and somebody asked, did you say doctor, as in that you are not expected to have a PhD?
No, I'm a PhD. I'm not a clinical.
Yes.
I'm not a clinician. I'm a PhD. My background is in public health and epidemiology specifically. And so this is Uganda provides a lot of excitement to be able to do this kind of work for us. So
yeah. But haven't you come to places where you introduce yourself and people are shocked that you have a PhD when they don't get shocked that men do?
Well, actually, not in Uganda, to be honest with you. Maybe it's the circles that I move. There's so many educated, highly educated people with PhDs and everything, both men and women. Uganda is packed with scientists, it's packed with lawyers, it's packed with very educated people. So I've never really experienced that, and it's really great that doesn't happen. It hasn't happened to me.
Okay, so to a certain extent, it's already safe for you to be working.
Yeah.
Okay, but we can improve that safety as well. We
Yeah.
bring in Rita Achiro from Uganda Women Network. I don't know how many times I've seen you this week, and still counting, but certainly a pleasure having you. Okay, cheers. Let's begin with safeness for women and AIDS, because if it isn't safe, that's how some women have ended up in a situation that no one wants to be in.
Exactly. Yeah, it is true. And I think in Uganda, there's more women living with HIV than men. There are many reasons for that. One of them is biologically, because women are more vulnerable, just purely because of the anatomy, of the reproductive anatomy. That's one. But then there is also the other factors that make women vulnerable, the social factors. There's the social and the biological. The social are the ones that are being discussed here, more in terms of women being afraid, for example, to keep away from an abusive partner who may be having multiple partners but will not use a condom, for example, or women who experience gender-based violence, or women who are just basically unable to negotiate their situation. We're earlier talking about when you're married and they pay dowry. How are you going to go back home when they've given the cows and that, So basically women, in many cases, women are forced and find themselves in abusive relationships and they cannot get out of them. And so they accept, and then also women are expected to start having children almost immediately. And the way you get pregnant is also the way you get HIV. It's just, and many women don't have a choice as to when that happens, how that happens, and in a way but the one thing I will say is that women in Uganda
are much more likely to seek services, but men are not. Therefore, even though there's more women living with HIV in Uganda, there's more men dying of it. Which is a very interesting dynamic of masculinity, the toxic masculinity, where men may not be wanting to go get services, they don't feel it's appropriate, that's beneath them, or they don't feel they don't have time, and that's just, we don't do that. So women will go get services, and so they are more likely to survive than men. I also want to say, when it comes to that, we do have to think about how we have structured our systems to enable that process. Because if health services are not designed where men can come, where men are comfortable, where men feel welcome, then the systems in a way perpetuate that kind of a situation where men then end up not being able to get services. So it basically compounds the problem.
Walking away from toxic masculinity, I've heard from women, it being said by women, that if you give men two choices, one, to go to Guantanamo Bay, and two, to go for an HIV test, they'll take going to Guantanamo Bay.
Guantanamo Bay is very far away, so I guess if they're going to do that, they will.
I'm talking about to torture chamber. They'll take a torture chamber over going for an HIV test. Is that what you've had?
They're very afraid. To be honest with you, and that's something that we find very interesting about men, is that they come out as macho, but deep inside, many of them are really afraid. And that is why I was talking about services being able to be structured in a way that allow the expression and the conversation to allow men to seek healthcare. And it's not just about HIV, it's about health in general. Men's health-seeking behavior is very weak. And part of it has to do with their not being able to, or not being socialized to be able to seek care, to admit they need help. And worse, when the person they are going to get help from is a woman. You know, a nurse, for example. So those sorts of things. So the Guantanamo Bay situation, it's funny. I mean, it's a joke you were making there. But it's more to say that indeed that is something that we do find, that men have a lot of fears. But I do feel that its programs can be and could be designed to be able to address those sorts of fears, as opposed to perpetuating them and assuming that it's not a structural issue. I think it's something that can be addressed.
Okay, and it will be interesting because most men think that if it is an HIV test, let her go, so we know whether we are fine.
The rest of us, yeah. It's even worse because sometimes they say, let her give birth and we shall see how the child, you know, and so yeah, so it's sometimes it can go to that level of extreme. But there's also very strong men, very, you know, as you're saying, there's good men.
And those are the ones we want to multiply.
And those are the ones we want to multiply.
Let's go for a test. They say, oh, fine, I will lead.
We go together, yeah. And one of the things as well that we find is that women are very afraid to disclose when they are positive, they're very afraid to disclose their results because the man will react and you're the one who brought this disease to the household. So it also has an impact on even women themselves being able to have a conversation at home because of fear of how it will be taken.
Okay. Rita, it's common to hear from mothers of sons saying, she killed my son.
I hear that.
Even when it's more likely that he's been the one rampaging around. How can we get to move away from that toxic masculinity to the place where men own up and take the lead? If in terms that we're talking about ending HIV/AIDS, saying if they want to go that direction, he says, no, I'll put the rubber on. Not saying, you go get a femidom.
Yeah, Samson, you see the challenge we've had, maybe it's better for us to understand how we got here.
Yes.
Why the toxic and at times septic masculinity. How did we get here? And what are the implications of us being here? And why do we need to move forward? How did we get here? Time immemorial, this is something that has been nurtured over time. That men have more power than women. Men are given more privileges. Men and boys have more sense of entitlement. And that socialization has been normalized to the extent that now it has become an abuse to women. That abuse is taking us backwards in every step that we want to take in society. Steps in terms of equality, steps in terms of equity, in terms of fairness, and steps in terms of development, whether it's at the personal level, it's at the community level, at the national level, or international level. So what we are talking about here is not just about freeing women, but it's about freeing ourselves as a society so that we live a more harmonious life. It's also important for us to know that the normalization of this toxic masculinity has huge implications, not only setting women and girls back, but it deprives men and boys as well. Just as the good doctor here said, that mindset of a man not admitting that he is sick, that he needs services, it's not just he doesn't need the services, it's because he was taught to be a macho man. He was taught that men don't give up easily, and it is women who fall sick. Why are you weak like a woman? So this negative masculinity actually has huge implications on men. I'm sure you've heard or read some statistics that most of our parents, grandparents, our husbands, our brothers, when their spouses pass on, they can hardly look after themselves because they have been socialized in a way that everything will be done by the woman. At home, they don't know how to cook, they don't know how to do their basic hygiene, and when this woman or a female figure is not in their vicinity, they are totally handcuffed. So when we talk about shifting, we are not just looking at the woman. We are also looking at empowering the man or the boy child for that matter. And it's important that we take this from that perspective. I want to say three things. Many times, for those of us who are advocates at the forefront, we are challenged and say, people tell us, that's how men are. You can never be a man. I bet many of us, the three of us here, and all the women and girls out there wouldn't want to be men. But what we want for all of us is to have equal opportunity. We need to be treated fairly. We need equality. Men and boys shouldn't fear that once a woman or a girl child has the same opportunity, that power that they have is going to be taken away from them. That the entitlement that they have enjoyed and the privileges they've had is not going to be taken away from them.
And that's where I'll ask, what's wrong with removing toxic power? If they've had power and it's toxic and it goes, do they lose? Because it could be that they have toxic power.
Actually, the power, what makes it toxic is not the power. What makes it toxic is that they try to assert that power negatively. Okay. Because you can still have the power, but positively. Okay. Nobody wants to take away the power from them. It's that negativity within the power. Men need the power, women need the power, but it has to be positive power. Okay. And that positive power will impact positively first and foremost on them, and then on the women and girls around them. And that is what this campaign should be about. Nobody wants to take the place of men. Nobody wants to take the place of boys. All we want to do is free your hands from all that. Samson, I'm sure you've heard this. There are many broke men out there, but they will never say they're broke. It's okay to be broke.
They say they are overcoming financial challenges.
The financial challenges. But they'll never come out to say that I am broke. And you might find there are women out there, like my sister here who does business. She could be loaded, as we said. There's no problem with that. It's okay for a man to be broke, and it's okay for a woman to have money. The only thing that you need to do is engage. And it's a period of time. Things move, and tomorrow you find the man has money again and the woman doesn't have money. So this mentality that I always have to have the money, and you're going through so much stress, which is not healthy. And that is what we're talking about. Free yourself.
When he loses a job and she's working, he says, I've been unwell. He can't say, I'm not working, because there's something wrong. Men cannot say they're not working when their wife is working. Men cannot say they're unwell because it's being weak. How does a man fall ill?
That's the point. That is the toxic masculinity we want the boys and men to get out of.
Okay.
What is bad for you is bad for a woman. What is good for you is good for a woman. And when it's good for all of you, life is better for everybody.
Okay, very interesting. Let's bring in Assistant Superintendent of Police here, Francis Ogweng. Is it part of being a policeman to kick women selling tomatoes? And that if you don't, then you're sort of not a policeman. It seems as if policemen are eager to show how powerful they are by kicking around, holding belts, and then throwing on pickup trucks. We can do without that. And say a policeman comes to arrest a woman on the street and say, you are under arrest. Please pick up your tomatoes, put them here, and I'll escort you to the police station. Some say, that's a weak guy.
Thank you very, very much. That is not part of being a police officer or a policeman who kick the person is supposed to help. That is really, really, really wrong. But having answered that, I want to put across a few things that Uganda Police is trying to do. First of all, at the beginning of this year, the IDP launched a positive masculinity campaign to try to remove that toxic image that some officers used to have. And this campaign, we are going to begin rolling it out through our weekly barazas to remove those few individuals who do such things to the people we are supposed to really protect.
Are they going to be sent home with disgrace?
If found guilty, yes. Then number two, I also want to say that within this time, Uganda Police has put a toll-free line, which is 0800 199 195 for women, children, and everybody to report any issue you have seen in your community. You've seen someone abusing their partners, you've seen maybe even an officer abusing someone, you should report that immediately, and that office is at the command center right now. The number is the 0800
yes.
199
199
195.
195
for gender-based violence cases reports. And we are really receiving.
Let me just give the number again, 0800 199 195. I can promise you I'll call that number before we end the show.
Even now you can call. From 4th of May, that line was operational and it is working 24/7. That is 24 hours in 7 days, just to receive those issues, because we believe that there are those women who cannot move to the police for fear of what the people will say. So we want them to call this toll-free line from their comfort zone. So these are some of the measures put in place for the public to get closer to the police. Then number two, I also want to say that to promote the good image of the police officer, Uganda Police has been promoting the He for She campaign for quite some time. The campaign that I am at the center and Afande Kasinji is at the center. We want all the officers to know that it is good, first of all, to work with these female officers, but secondly, also good to work with every client the same way. What used to be like if a woman has come to a police and reported this violence, you take it as tribal issues. No, that should now be a thing of the past. So I think police is doing something. So that bad character or what I can call a toxic masculinity of some officers, it is disappearing. You may also need to note that some departments that used to be only for female officers, like Child and Family Protection Department, where I work, 5 years ago had only female officers, but today as I speak, we have over 150 male officers in this department, just to encourage everyone to come and feel at home when they have issues. So those are some of the things which the police is trying to put in place to root out those toxic masculinity.
Okay. Does that suggest that we are not too far from a day when we will have a female IGP?
I think yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I'll be the happiest male police officer serving under a female IGP. I'll be the happiest.
Of course, that's down to the appointing authority, but the wish of Afando Gweng to the appointing authority has certainly been expressed. Bringing in here Angela Bagaine, talking Uganda women entrepreneurs. In my mind, a lady selling tomatoes in a market in Bwaise or Kalere is also an entrepreneur. Sometimes when we talk of an entrepreneur, we think of Bagaine, arcade, driving a huge Land Cruiser and all. But those ladies there are entrepreneurs. What are some of the challenges they're experiencing that men, toxic masculinity removed, can help them overcome?
Thank you, Samson. Now, the big challenges in the informal sector begin from a cultural background and upbringing. And we find the informal sector has been faced with so many norms that carry through and bring this toxicity in play. When you find an informal business, it has a family setting. But the family setting comes with challenges that started from when they were raising these children. The boys are given specific tasks. The girls are given specific tasks. And as they grow up, the boys are encouraged to go more into business, into the harder work. You need to change a light bulb, the boy is called to do it. You need to carry a ladder from one place to another, the boy is called to do it. And you find that the girls are constantly told, your place is in the kitchen, or go and wash the clothes. Or, you know, with children, we have this thing of wait for your brother to bathe. It's the boy is the one who's told, no, it's okay, your sister will do it. When we send, as parents, we send our children quite often. So we tend to send the girls more. Go and get me this, go and get me a cup of tea, and it's automatic. So what happens with the informal setting? When we then go and start businesses as families, the same occurs. You find that the role stereotyping is already ingrained and then continues within the business. The girl will be put at the front to sell. The boy will be told, go and take the car if there's a car, or go and take the border to pick the groceries from point B.
So she's put in the front because she looks good.
Well, there's a belief that they are not as strong.
Okay.
And this is where I think we need to look at not the background of the issue, but the way we really divide the roles within our businesses. If you have more of your female in the lesser, what we call the softer side of your business, then you are a promoter.
Okay.
You cannot get away from the gender equality or the gender equity question without judging yourself and putting on that gender lens and saying, what am I doing wrong? Do I have more people in a role that is predetermined by how they were raised?
Okay.
Secondly, we need to understand that within all of us there is a fight which we need to balance out between a masculinity and a femininity within us. The women who rise in these informal sectors are the ones who try to balance and come to a point where they are able to attack manly jobs, at the same time do the feminine, without having to judge that this is so feminine, this is so masculine. When we go to areas like Soroti in Bali, we find many women ride bicycles. But if you find a woman riding a bicycle, okay, before COVID, in Kampala, it shocks many people. The first woman to ride a boda, it becomes a story. But she has embraced it. It doesn't show that she's lacking strength. All it shows is that she can do it. So we find it strange that women in the informal business can build arcades or build a business and take it to the next level. That person becomes a lone star within a sector that is really male dominated.
Okay.
We also find that women in informal sector, there are issues that men face that women don't face, and there are issues that women face which men will completely ignore. Many businesses will not want the woman to deal with the money because they don't think a woman is good at accounting or looking after accounts. And we even see this in inheritance. Rita was talking about it. We see it in inheritance. They will not discuss issues of the family succession with the girls. They'll call the boys for a luchiko or a meeting to discuss the issues of the home. Then we also have the shouting over the women. I don't know if you've noticed, but if you go to some businesses, you'll find that people repeat their instructions to women. It's an element of, she's not hearing me well, I need to reiterate my instruction. We also find, there are so many cases that you see that are very subtle. We see cases where when it comes to cooking, it comes to, you know, the things, baking, that kind of business, you'll have more women employed than men. Even in the corporate world, it happens. We have more people putting tellers and front office people giving those positions to women than men. So we have become
Apart
ingrained.
from hotels, I haven't gone to an office and found the receptionist or front office manager male. I don't remember.
That's the thing. It's a stereotype that physical appearance will bring in more business, or a pretty girl at the front will attract more people to come in. It's a perception. And you know, the challenge with bias in business is that you're dealing with the same act, but it's being perceived differently.
Okay.
And as long as there's bias in business, you're going to have challenges. Now, what we've seen in this campaign we have on gender equality across the world is that in countries like South America, in South American countries, Venezuela, etc., the women are driving the concrete trucks. They are keeping them cleaner. They're keeping them. They're keeping their schedules, because women have certain aspects that they are stronger at.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean men can't be strong at them. It's about embracing some of these things and taking them on. We all have areas that we can learn from each other.
Okay. Very interesting there. If I had renters, I would be more inclined to rent to women and married men, because the chances that they will run away with my money is usually less. That's why I think I'm told banks also ask, are you married? Because they know that if she's involved, there is a likelihood to pay. Rita, men will put on fitting clothes, stocking cities. Men will put on fitting clothes and shorts, and they will move from one end to the town of the next, nobody whistles. The moment she puts on fitting clothes, then she's whistled at, she's heckled, people want to undress her. Positive masculinity. Like they've left the man alone. Can't they just leave the woman alone?
You see, Samson, the beauty about this, the negative or toxic, septic masculinity is learned.
Okay.
And the beauty is, it can be unlearned.
Unlearned, okay.
So I think we shouldn't dwell on the wrongs that people have done or continue to do. The purpose of this campaign, Men at Work, is to help us unlearn some of the wrong things,
okay,
so that we're able to correct. It's very true that culture and negative, toxic masculinity looked at women as sex objects.
Okay.
And that is why when you see a woman, you know, beautifully dressed in her nice jeans, you know, nice tight pants, and minding her business, somebody, you know, starts whistling, and at times you even look at the type of people who are whistling, and you're really like, is it? So a woman in the face of a man, it doesn't matter what, you know, level of a man, is a woman. Now that is culture. That is the toxic socialization, normalization of abuse and degrading of women.
That we want to stop.
That
and
we
say,
want to stop.
let women be.
Let women be. Just like we want men to be, but be in a very positive way. Use their power positively to influence the woman. The challenge when we talk about a woman, Samson, you don't look at your 3 daughters. you're looking at the other woman, not knowing that the woman, just like your daughter is going to be called a woman by another man,
Men at
your
home.
mother, your sister, your cousin, your aunt will be called another woman. So unless and until men start seeing women as the women around them first, and not these other women they bring in the home or the ones they meet on the streets. Because the way you treat this woman is the way your daughter is going to be treated, your mother, your sister.
But isn't that the problem? Because if they're already treating their wives badly, and they can't have their daughters inherit their estates, then there's already a problem. Because those women within their spaces, who they should care most about, they have underrated, they have abused. So there's already a problem even at that level.
That's how it spirals from one family to another, from one family to another. What we're trying to say now is let's change that.
First with women at home.
With women at home.
Okay.
Yesterday I was
And men at home.
Yes, and men at home. How do we, or how can men, not we, because I'm not a man, how can men and boys at home help to ensure that the women and girls in their vicinity are protected, are treated fairly, with dignity? And I asked my son yesterday, what can be done? He said, one, the simplest thing is respect them. And I asked, what is respect? Then he said, okay, give them some space, understand them, build their confidence for them to be able to talk to you. I listened in. Also helping in the household, ensuring that you protect them, you don't harass them. And there's simple things that everybody can do intentionally to improve the lives of women. Now, when you go to I don't want to lose the point of the dressing up. You know, at times you see men whistling at a woman on the streets, but these men, when they go to the stadium to see the women on the runway in skimpy pants, everybody's cheering them up, yeah? You know, doing their thing, the sports, but nobody at that point, nothing goes in their mind the way it goes on the street.
Because then it's sport.
Then it's sport. So what makes the difference? It is all about your mindset.
Because
the woman you see on the lane in the field is not different from the one you see here. Actually, the one you see there is more or less dressed. But it's about perception, how we look at these women. Looking at women as sex objects is what has caused us problem. Looking at women as second level citizens is what has caused us problem. And why do we do that? Why do men and boys do that? Because they feel when women are at the same level with them, they lose power, they lose privilege, their sense of entitlement is lost. And that is the balance that we need to strike, that once you empower a woman, once you give her the same levels of privileges and sense of entitlement, this is what the benefit that accrues to men and boys. So the assurance that men will benefit even more when women in their societies, in their families, are empowered, enjoy rights, are protected, that assurance is what they need to do. And they need to understand that. If we do not understand that, believe you me, the 51% population that is female, regardless of the 49%, however far they run, they will not run any further, because the 51% will be pulling back the development, the steps that they would have made in life. So it's important that men understand the need, the urgent need. We need that like yesterday. We needed it like yesterday for women to be empowered.
Okay, very interesting. Dr. Karusa, I'm concerned about HIV/AIDS. How is men at work, men at home, men in all these spaces, what can men do to make sure that we get to that place where we have zero spread of HIV/AIDS, at least in Uganda? Naive as I may sound, I think we can get to a place like that.
And I think we can. Men have an important role, and I'll actually just pick up from where my sister was talking about the kinds of conversations that can happen in the home. Being open, being available, being willing to discuss. She was talking about how she was talking with her son. Men talking with their partners, couples talking together. Because I think if we overcome the fears, then we come to be able to...
Do you want us to ask where he was as she was talking to her son?
Well, actually, maybe...
That's another conversation.
Another conversation, another time.
Yes.
But just to make the point that HIV, first of all, is a family disease. It happens within families. So if it's discussed in the context of a family, it's more likely to be solved. But if it's seen with suspicion, as you're the one who brought it, then it will remain that way and it will not be solved. So for me, I think men can do a lot by being open, and a lot of men are open, but men can be more open. They can bring the discussion, not in a judgmental way, but in a way that enables a conversation within the family to support the partner or to support also themselves, and vice versa. Women also need to feel comfortable when that conversation comes, so that they don't feel as if they are not part of the conversation or they have to hide. They also need to be able to be at the table when the conversation happens. But I also wanted to make the point you were saying about the dressing, the way women might dress, and then people will shout at them and all that. Usually it's men that do that. You never see women treating other women in that way. But I think part of it is because society is normally trying to preserve itself. And it preserves itself by putting restrictions on the weakest, quote unquote. And for me, I think that's a big problem, because it basically means that you want to free yourself, but yet you want to hold somebody else in place. While you free yourself to do whatever you want to do, you want someone else to be holding the cultural values and the restrictions you place. I think that is wrong. You cannot progress in a society when you're busy keeping someone down. Even being able to walk, if your hand is busy just pushing someone down, you yourself will stay in that place. So the idea, as my colleague was saying, of being able to develop together and recognizing that two brains are better than one, and instead of putting the other one down. So that's what I would say in the context of HIV. Both of them should be able to speak with each other, and that leadership can be taken by men in the household.
Afando Gweng, if I could ask you, probably as we wrap up this, why in Uganda does indecent dress mean women alone?
I like both my sisters said. It is the culture, I think.
Okay.
It is how men were brought up in a society that we need to unlearn or deconstruct. But also, there was one very good point. A woman running a race, there's no problem, even if they are not dressed full. But now when they come to another space and dress that same way, that becomes a problem.
Sooner or later you hear a statement from Father Lokodo.
I have gone to many places, Karamoja, even in my village, mothers used to dress just in skirts, and that was not a problem. But it becomes a problem now here. Really, I don't understand. But I want to just support the point is that even me, I have also been this bad man at one point.
Yes.
But when I learned something, I really converted myself. I really changed. And I think that is what we need to do with a lot of men. They have learned some ways of life that we need to engage them and try to unlearn what they learned for a long time and tell them, you know what, that kind of belief is wrong. That kind of belief is wrong. If we bring these women together, if we appreciate them, if we work together with them, we'll go far. Like she has just said, the 49%, even if we try as much as what, we may not go as much as if we had gone together with everybody. So that is culture to me.
Okay. I'll ask a question here to all of you. If you were to mention a name of a man in Uganda who you'd want to see change, each one of you, which name would you give?
To see change?
To see change. Okay, let me go. A positive role model. If you were asked to recruit a man to this campaign as a positive role model, give me a name, Angela.
Well, if we're looking at this particular thought process.
Yes.
This program works. I think we should thank Dr. Maxim
Yes.
for starting Men at Work across the entire continent. This is being piloted here.
Yes.
And it's proposing that we bring men to the fore in this equation.
Okay.
This conversation has always been coming from the woman's side.
Okay.
So I would applaud for this particular, for gender equality, that bringing men to the fore, this, I think that has been a fantastic way of bringing the men to the limelight to lead this movement.
Okay.
So I applaud this particular.
So in terms of role models, which name out there goes out for you in the Ugandan space? So that one would be a good positive role model.
You know, when a person hesitates,
Yeah.
then you know
There are not too many.
there are not too many.
Okay, fine. Let me get to Rita there. Is there a name there? Role models? In our space, you said that one would be a good one.
No, I think all men have the potential to be good
Okay.
men.
You also are evading the question.
I'm not evading.
You will come to a name.
I'm not evading because I know what is happening or why we are here. It's not their making.
Okay.
They were socialized to be so.
Oh, okay.
And even as girl children, there are certain things we're socialized to believe, even as we're trying to break those barriers. You know, if you have a S4, you can be a nurse, you can't, when you go to med school, there are certain courses you can do. All those things, they're barriers. It doesn't mean even women.
But what I'm asking is, you would like to tell some of us men that, look at so and so. You men look up to him, and do you have a name like that?
Each and every man has a good part of him
Okay.
and has a bad part of him.
Okay.
So when I say Samson is good, it doesn't mean he's good 100%.
Okay.
Samson has very good things about him, but the toxic masculinity aspects that still exist.
Okay.
So I want to encourage that all men are part of this. But Samson, before I lose it, it's very important.
I'll give you
we
10
leave-
seconds because
Yes.
my producer is
Before
saying we should be
leave,
switching.
We
Yes.
need to understand the implication of the toxic masculinity on society. I think that is something that has not been talked about. The implication is that we are losing women day and night. Women are dying because of abuse. Their Fande has said here. Just within 3 months, they recorded over 3,000 cases because of COVID, which is just an upscale. Because of the toxic masculinity, we have almost 60% of our women in this country who have not accessed education to at least O level. And because of that, we have most of our women working in the lower ranks of employment. We are losing a lot of GDP. So what can we do then? Men need to get on board. When they get on board, they reduce the burden on themselves, first of all. I want to believe you're a better man because madam also makes a contribution. And the girls are much happier because daddy and mommy are also contributing. So this contribution should not be seen as if we're taking power, privilege, and the entitlement from them, but we are developing together as a family, as a community, nation, and as a global community.
Thank you very much, Rita, there. We've had Dr. Karusa Kiragu, who is from UNAIDS. We have had Assistant Superintendent of Police, Francis Ogweng. There was a confession there. Thank you so much. That is positive masculinity. You don't become any less an officer of the police force for admitting that along the way there have been things, but now you've changed. That is something that we should all applaud. And of course, we've also had Angela Bagene from Ugandan Women Entrepreneurs Association Limited. It's limited in liability. And of course, Rita from the Uganda Women Network. One of the things that I will say that I've never really understood about African men, in any space you sit with African men, they talk about how they like calves, and calves are a big issue. Then women come into their spaces and show them calves, and they ridicule them. Well, men, what do you want? Let's get back to Mordecai Murisa. Mordecai, we're handing over back to you. Do you also like calves?
I want my thing to show before I take it off.
Thank you so much, Samson Kasumba. Wonderful discussion over there. Well, if I have to let you know, or if I have anything to say, I'll say words of Ernest Miller Hemingway, one man from Illinois, who once said that there's nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man, nobility lies in being better to your former self. And that's what we are discussing, that, you know, we are better living together as brothers and sisters and not looking at the rest of the other gender, women, as weak or that should be looked at and laughed at or should be disrespected and a couple of other things. But well, we are getting to the conclusion of this discussion, and this time around I'm joined by two wonderful people. One is Edekemi Idieli, the Deputy Country Representative of UN Women, and of course the Chief of Strategy NBS, that is Mr. Joe Chigozie. I will start with you, Mr. Joe Chigozie, because of the campaign. Men men are brought on the front line to make sure that they fight for gender equality. One thing, how's been the discussion for you?
I think the discussion has been very very deep. There's been a lot of insights that have cut across the divide from the different speakers. Your Excellencies have been very spot on some of the issues they've talked about. Her Excellency Rosa Malango and of course His Excellency Paul Lingard have been very in-depth, and Dr. Maxim, and the rest of the speakers. For me, personally, I think it's a paradigm shift. It's a perception shift. It's about realizing a new positive masculinity. I think that's critical. They underline the word positive masculinity. Some men might be scared. Am I losing my masculinity? No. It's about the new positive. You need to be positive. You need to realize that you cannot live in the space alone. You have to be able to accommodate the different gender, which is the woman and or the girl. So I think this is a very good discussion to open up this discussion, and I like some of the views that have been expressed by the different speakers. I think it's been wonderful. It's been an eye-opener. It's something that is opening up the debate. If you look at the the trends right now as I speak, there's a lot of discussion, and I think we need to pick up that discussion. We need to be very civil about everyone's opinion. It's very important. But I must say that this Men at Work with Gender Equality for Empowering Women has been very excellent, day one. And I believe that day two will even be better. As Next Media, we're very privileged. As NBS, we're very privileged to be part of something big. Because we know that most of our content that we actually broadcast has something to do with women. There's entertainment, there's empowerment, there's involvement, and all these things. So for us, this is important opportunity to be part of a 3-year campaign to give a platform to women. You've seen very intelligent women today, discussing very pertinent issues, and we're very excited to be part of the partnership.
Yes, let me come to you, Miss Adekeni. I think it's the right pronunciation. Today, we've seen high-level men and women, gray-haired men and women. Where is the youth involvement in this?
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to appreciate NBS, because it is unusual that a TV station will dedicate up to 5 hours or so to discussing issues of gender equality and the empowerment of women. It is phenomenal. It is unusual. We are just coming out of unprecedented times, and the COVID response has taught us so much, and we're happy that we have this platform on NBS. Regarding the youth, I want you to know that they are at the center of this whole campaign. Yes, we are starting from the elderly people and those who are involved in decision making, because we're talking about men at work and men in town. How can men in position of power use that power to influence change that will give greater opportunity to women in the workplace and women in business, giving them more opportunity? Then we also referred to men in town, where we want to see decision makers and traditional rulers making public spaces safer for women. So, I come from Nigeria, and we have a proverb that says, it is a foolish child who would not stand on the shoulder of the elderly to look forward. So it means that elderly people have a lot of wisdom and knowledge, which we're trying to put down now. However, next week, we're going to go all out for the youth. So we're going to have a youth concert where young people will have the opportunity to also express their views. Now, this is Generation X and Generation Z, and we want to leverage on their energies, we want to leverage on their capacity and their power, their innovation, their knowledge, and see how we can use them at this time to influence the socialization that's going on to make gender equality and empowerment of women more prominent in the discourse in town, in self, and in all the places that we have highlighted as part of this campaign.
Wonderful. As a partner, do you think today's objectives have been achieved?
I think I cannot agree more with my sister Adekemi. She's put it right. We've dedicated a lot of resources in terms of making sure that you have about 15 million Ugandans being able to watch this e-conference, the launch of Men at Work for Gender Equality and Empowerment for Women. In the diaspora, across our social media platforms, it's been very excellent. We've seen a lot of views in there. So the whole world has watched. So for us, our objectives were to ensure that we give a platform. We promote the event, we promote the 3-year campaign, but also give, as men who are behind at the helm of Next Media, it's important to offer this platform. So for us, that's what the partnership means, to offer space for women to come and speak and talk about the issues that they would like to talk about. And so our objectives have been met. I must say I'm overwhelmed with the amount of content that we've had, but also training online for the young people. And I must say this is just the beginning. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot that's going to happen across the 3 years, and we're very happy to have this partnership.
And right there, when you say this is just the tip of an iceberg, 3-year campaign, what else should we expect?
So after that concert, we will be working very closely with men in positions of power, looking at building the capacity of men to understand I don't have to get out. I can share the space and give them opportunity, and we would both be comfortable if we decide to enjoy the space together. So within the next 3 years, UN Women will be working very closely with NBS, and together we would be having a very strong media campaign, reaching all segments of the society, and we would be watching, because at the end of every year, we would be giving an award to those who have distinguished, committing their resources, committing their time, and using that to promote and advance the rights of women in the different places we've talked about. Either women in self within the domestic spaces, how women, men and boys are not allowing domestic violence to hamper the progress of women. Otherwise, men in town, religious leaders, civil society organizations in the academia, cultural institutions, religious institutions in the private sector, and the media. We will be identifying men who have distinguished themselves, and we'll be giving them an award and showcasing what they have done in order to promote women. I'm very gratified by the comments that were made earlier by Patrick Bitature about the opportunities that he's given for his daughters and his sons. He's making it half and half, that they're all going to gain equal access to the empire that he's building. Why should a number of my children not have equal access to my inheritance? It does not make sense. So these are some of the influences that we want to bring about in the society, and we're sure that we'll be able to bring about that change. But first, be the change that we want to see?
Well, tomorrow is the launch. In a few, just seconds, I just want you to give your conclusive remark.
First of all, I would like to thank the partners, United Nations Uganda, He4She, UN Women, the Swedish Embassy, of course Protea Hotel, where we've been doing a wonderful broadcast, and of course NBS, and of course the entire production team. I must say the team has been excellent. The team that we've worked with, the technical team, has been very, very excellent. I cannot mention everyone, but I'd like to say it's been a wonderful start for what would be a very long, protracted, advocacy for women empowerment and gender equality. So tomorrow will basically be the official launch for a campaign, Men at Work for Gender Equality and Empowerment of Women. So I can only urge our viewers to be glued, of course, as usual, on NBS from 2. I can say watch NBS throughout the day because, yes, we'll start at 2, but continue watching NBS throughout the day. And it will be exciting to see how the launch will pan out tomorrow. But I'd like to thank everyone who has been watching us throughout the 5-hour broadcast. And I'd like to say it's never too late to be part. It's never too late to be part of this, advocacy. But also, the commitment is important. It doesn't matter what your thoughts were yesterday. Your thoughts of today are more important. Yeah.
Well, we just cannot go beyond this wonderful discussion. I just want to remind you what I said. Privilege is an emotional commitment to ignorance. Do not feel privileged than any other person. We are just all equal. We just have to get to work, men. We are leading the campaign now as the UN and all stakeholders are requesting us to be part of this. Till then, my name is Mordecai Mrisa Martin Jr. I wish you a blessed evening.